The manila envelope appeared like an intruder in his routine. It was hidden behind the medicine boxes in the bathroom cabinet, and Kaio only found it because he was searching for painkillers for the insomnia that had plagued him for months. Upon opening it, he found a recent ultrasound. At the bottom, printed heartbeats, the detail that took his breath away. Livia's name, his wife. It didn't make sense. They hadn't been intimate for months. It was impossible to be his. For a moment, the ground seemed to disappear. The shock of betrayal isn't just the blow. It's the realization that someone silently orchestrated the fall of trust. Kaio put the envelope back in place without changing anything. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies in not reacting immediately. That night during dinner, Livia came downstairs dressed up, perfumed, looking more at her phone than at her husband. "Will you be working late tomorrow?" she asked with rehearsed naturalness. "Maybe," Kaio replied, while observing the screen's reflection in the spoon. It was impossible to ignore the sequence of recent months. The refusals, the distancing, the calculated coldness. Injustice has a smell, and Kaio was beginning to recognize the bitter odor of lies. Then, as if she were the victim, Livia shot back. "You seem distant." He smiled, unshaken. Not distant, awake. It was the first time he let slip, even in metaphor, that he already perceived the charade. In the early hours, instead of drowning in tears, Kaio made a decision. If life placed him before a lie, it wouldn't be screaming that would dismantle it, but strategy. He created an alternative email, activated connection logs on the house router, set up hidden cloud folders. He would save every trace, every contradiction, like someone building a wall, brick by brick. It wasn't just about saving his marriage or exposing his wife. It was about saving himself, proving that truth still mattered more than a well-staged performance. T. Rust doesn't ask for proof, he reflected silently, but lies do. In the week following the found ultrasound, Kaio began to see signs that had previously gone unnoticed. It's curious how the mind, when illuminated by an uncomfortable truth, reorganizes the past in new ways. Livia's constant delays were no longer due to traffic. Hair carefully styled wasn't for meetings. Even her shoes said more than she did. They shone too much for someone who claimed to pull all-nighters on reports. The world, when looked at with attention, reveals secrets even in the most mundane details. What bothered Kaio most wasn't just the suspicion of betrayal, but the silent cruelty of living beside someone who treated him like dead weight, a man supposedly without ambition. This perception became clear during a nephew's birthday party, when Livia, in front of family and friends, threw a sharp indirect like a knife. Men who don't grow become dead weight. The forced laughter echoed like a slap in the face. And there, Kaio realized, the injustice wasn't just intimate, it was public. He didn't react at the moment. He smiled with the calm of someone holding fire in their pocket without letting the smoke escape. But inside, he registered every word as evidence. He learned that public wounds require calculated responses. That night, while Livia slept, he opened her notebook. The browser history was too clean, almost surgical. Those who erase traces confess without words, he reflected. Using portable software stored on an old pen drive, he managed to recover temporary files. Among them, a PDF of a hotel reservation in Livia's name, dated from an afternoon when she swore to be in a team meeting. Kaio's heart tightened, but his mind remained cold. He didn't print, didn't confront. He just saved to cloud and external backup, cataloging it as the first concrete proof. He understood that the greatest victories aren't conquered with haste, but with patience, and that anger is strategy's enemy. The next morning, Livia prepared coffee as if nothing had happened. Her phone glued to her hand, notifications hidden under the locked screen. Kaio watched her in silence like an archer preparing to shoot, but waiting for the target to position itself. When she commented that she would have a tough day at the office, he just agreed without raising suspicions. Internally, he reflected, lies are loose rope. The more the person pulls, the easier the snap will be. The important thing was not to rush. Every traitor believes they control the game until they discover too late that their opponent had already switched all the pieces. In that calculated silence, Kaio consolidated his decision. He wouldn't be a desperate husband begging for answers, but a patient investigator, ready to build a tribunal where the sentence would come from Livia's own hands. Kaio began to live in two parallel dimensions. T.O. the world, he was the attentive, polite husband who asked about Livia's day, offered rides, and kept a smile on his face. But inside, he had become a silent strategist, observing every detail, noting schedules and cross-referencing excuses like a detective assembling a puzzle. There was no longer innocence in his gestures. Every word she said was cataloged as data, every deviation from routine, a red alert. Haste is the luxury of the naive, he reflected. He knew that if he wanted to win this war, he would need the patience of a chess player, not the impulsiveness of a dice player. Chance helped on a Wednesday. Livia forgot her notebook open in the living room, connected to corporate email. Kaio didn't open anything directly. He didn't want to leave obvious traces. He discreetly inserted a portable program he carried on a pen drive. It was an almost invisible logger, designed to capture attachments and send them to a hidden folder. That night, already on his computer, he saw the first result, a digital receipt for dinner at an expensive restaurant, paid in Livia's name, with a note for two people. The most intriguing part was the loyalty registration, S. Andrade. Kaio had never heard that name in her work reports. His stomach churned, but his mind stayed cold. He printed, saved, and added to the secret folder. Second proof secured. That night, when she returned home, the perfume she brought wasn't the same one she kept in the closet. There were masculine notes mixed in the fabric of her coat. Kaio, sitting at the table, read a book with serene expression. "Aren't you going to sleep?" Livia asked, perhaps to probe. "Not yet. I'm reviewing some notes," he replied. The phrase sounded simple, but carried irony, because what he was reviewing weren't paper pages, but the thin line between doubt and certainty. There was no longer space for assumptions. T. Ruth was approaching like a train, inevitable and loud. On Friday, Kaio put a simple but risky plan into practice. In the morning, he commented calculatedly, "I should return later today. I have some reports to review." The phrase came out calm, without raising suspicions, but it was just bait. In the late afternoon, he returned discreetly, parking 2 streets behind the house. The clock marked 4:07 p.m. when Livia left. She wasn't wearing work clothes. She had on a tight dress, high heels, and impeccable makeup, like someone getting dressed, not for a meeting, but for a date. Kaio's heart beat hard, but his face remained cold. "Those who lose control lose the war," he repeated to himself. He followed her at a distance, the car advancing slowly through the streets. The destination was a discreet commercial building, almost invisible in the urban landscape. Suddenly, a man appeared at the gate, tall, with rolled-up dress shirt and tie in his pocket. She smiled upon seeing him, and then they approached with rehearsed naturalness. Kaio parked behind a van and grabbed his phone. He adjusted the zoom and recorded, Livia laughing, holding his hand, entering the adjacent cafe together, exchanging a quick kiss. Each click was more than a photo, it was a receipt. At that moment, suspicion transformed into certainty. It was the third concrete proof, impossible to contest. Back home, he reviewed the images in silence. His stomach churned, but his mind was sharp as a blade. Pain was inevitable, but it was also fuel. Pain is just gasoline when you have a destination, he murmured, organizing the files in the secret folder. When Livia arrived later, she brought shopping bags and a rehearsed smile. "I stopped by the mall after work," she said, as if it were just another ordinary day. Kaio just nodded, his expression serene. Inside, he felt like a judge who already had the verdict in hand. He locked the phone in the drawer and concluded, "Proof isn't for fighting. Proof is for winning." Saturday dawned lazy, but in Kaio's mind there was no rest. While the sun illuminated the kitchen, he watched Livia come down the stairs in her robe, yawning as if nothing were out of place. It was a common scene, almost banal, but for Kayo every detail was now a piece on a board. When she commented between sips of coffee, "Monday I'll leave the office early. We have an important team meeting." He just nodded, saying, "Of course, love. If you need me, just call." Inside, every word was noted as an inconsistency record. He already had 3 solid proofs. Now the next step wasn't to seek more, but to plan how to use them. Keeping resentment only made him sick. Documenting, on the other hand, was preparing justice. That same day, Kayo locked himself in his office and began organizing a real dossier. He divided the folders into categories: hotel, restaurant, photos. He named files with dates, times, and locations. He printed paper copies and saved cloud versions. He also stored everything on an encrypted pen drive, hidden at the bottom of the drawer. Lies love closed stages, he reflected. I'm going to turn on the spotlights in the packed auditorium. With each save click, each archived page, he felt less like a victim and more like a strategist. Ruth, for him, was ammunition, and the more silent he remained, the more dangerous his position became for Livia's charade. At night, back on the sofa, Livia unexpectedly approached, leaning against him with rehearsed affection. For any couple, it might seem like reconciliation. For Kayo, it was just a performance by an actress in a poorly written play. He didn't push her away. He stroked her hair, looking at the ceiling like someone contemplating the future. The sharpest revenge is the one that wears calm as a cloak, he thought, because surprise is what kills the charade. And at that moment he decided he would continue pretending normalcy. He would pretend not to know, until he had the perfect stage to pull back the curtain. Because in the theater of lies, the last act always belongs to truth. On Monday, Kayo observed every gesture of Livia's like someone analyzing moves on a chessboard. She came down the stairs with impeccably styled hair, careful makeup, and new heels. It was too early for so much production. He kept his expression serene, but internally turned on the alert. He decided to test the threat of lies with a simple, almost innocent question. "Why, you have an early meeting today, right?" She blinked quickly, like someone caught by surprise, but soon recovered composure. "Yes, a presentation for the client. It's going to be tough." For any distracted ear, it would sound normal. For Kayo, it was like hearing glass crack. Lies don't break immediately, but they reveal the crack. He let her leave without questioning. He kissed her forehead, smiled, and followed with his eyes until her car disappeared. But the real show was happening on his phone. The tracker, discreetly installed days before, showed the route in real time. The pointer on the map wasn't heading to the office, but to a residential condominium in a neighboring district. Kayo took screenshots of the route, recorded times, and saved everything in the evidence folder. It was another piece fitted. Now it wasn't just about casual encounters, but a parallel routine. The web of lies was closing with each save click. At night, sitting at the table, he decided to repeat the test. "How was the meeting? Any problems with the client?" he asked with a calm voice. Livia, without hesitating, replied, "Everything went well, just tiring." Kayo drank a sip of water, disguising the smile that almost escaped. He knew that each of her answers was like a signed receipt. He thought, lies have short legs, but vanity has high heels, and high heels make noise when they fall. Dinner proceeded as if nothing were wrong, but for Kayo, every word spoken was another proof recorded in the silent tribunal he was preparing. The next morning, Kayo observed Livia's rush as she left for work. Her heels echoed on the floor like a soundtrack of performance. As soon as she crossed the door, he opened her notebook. The logger installed days before was beginning to bear fruit. Among the automatically copied files, there was an email that caught his attention. The subject was short, "Can't wait to see you." The sender, Raphael A. The body of the message left no space for innocent interpretations. "Thursday, same time. I'll bring the wine." Kayo's heart tightened, but his mind remained firm. It wasn't just suspicion, it was evidence. He saved the email in 2 different clouds, printed a copy, and cataloged the file with date and time. He organized it in the secret folder. alongside the hotel reservation, restaurant receipt, and meeting photos. Each proof was like a brick in a wall that could no longer be torn down. Now he had 4 concrete records, each stronger than the previous one. While organizing the files, he reflected, lies can fool people, but they don't fool digital timestamps. Every click leaves a mark. Every trace is a confession. That night, Livia returned with her usual tired air. She threw her bag on the sofa and said, "Maybe I'll work overtime tomorrow." Caio raised his eyes from the newspaper and replied calmly, "Of course, love, just don't overdo it." She smiled, satisfied for believing she still had control. But inside, he knew the mask was fragmenting. There was no longer a way to hide the crack, and he had the chisel to expose it before everyone. Lying down, he reflected, every lie has a digital signature. Why, you can erase history, but you can't erase traces. And truth always finds a way to the final protocol. And with that certainty, he closed his eyes, because even silence now worked in his favor. On Thursday, the tracker confirmed what Caio already intuited. At 7:14 p.m., the marking on the map stopped in front of a discreet hotel on the highway. The sign blinked in red, comfort and discretion. The 2 words were almost synonyms for betrayal. Caio parked a few meters back, hidden by the shadow of a van, and waited. From the car, he observed every detail like someone watching a play whose ending he already knows, but still needs to see. In a few minutes, Raphael appeared in the parking lot, adjusting his dress shirt and putting his tie in his pocket. Livia got out of the car right after, and the smile she exchanged with him was clearer proof than any document. Caio's heart beat hard, but his hands didn't tremble. He grabbed his phone, adjusted the zoom, and began photographing. First, the 2 approaching, then her laughing at something he said. Next, a quick, complicit kiss at the lobby door. Each click was a stamp, a receipt. They weren't just images. They were confessions, frozen in pixels. Caio knew that any explosion of rage there would only destroy his advantage. Those who explode before time destroy their own dynamite, he thought. The secret was maintaining calm, even when the heart screamed. Back in the car, he reviewed the photos. They were clear, with marked time and background lights that would serve as incontestable reference. He saved them in 2 distinct folders, uploaded to cloud, and organized them with previous evidence. Now the collection was robust. Hotel reservation, dinner receipt, intimate email, and finally, images. At dawn, lying next to Livia, who slept as if innocent, Caio reflected, betrayal isn't just the physical act. It's the whole theater of lies, the invented scripts, the rehearsed lines. Every actor believes the curtain will never fall, but every play has an end, and he was already ready to pull the curtain. On Saturday, to Caio's surprise, it was Livia who suggested a romantic dinner. "We've been so distant. I thought it would be good to go out a bit," she said, smiling like an actress trying to improvise after forgetting the main line. For any naive husband, that could sound like a reconciliation gesture, but Caio knew it was nothing but distraction, an attempt to relieve guilt and reaffirm the role of dedicated wife. Even so, he accepted, not to please her, but to observe. Sometimes the most revealing stage is the one where the actor believes they still dominate the scene. At the restaurant, she chose the wine, told banal office stories, and laughed at unfunny jokes. Caio accompanied her with serenity, but inside, every gesture of hers reminded him of the photos he had taken 2 days before. The same complicit smile he had seen in front of the hotel was now rehearsed for him, but without real brightness. When he asked almost casually, "And the work people still overloaded?" she replied with confidence, "Very much. I don't even know how I've been managing." The answer came out too clean, too rehearsed, like a memorized line. Caio drank a sip of wine, hiding the smile that wanted to escape. Those who lie forget that cameras already exist, and cameras don't lie, he thought. Back at the apartment, Livia lay on the sofa and pulled his hand for him to sit beside her. She leaned on his shoulder, feigning intimacy. For any observer, they would be a normal couple trying to rescue the flame. But for Kaio, it was just another performance. He ran his hand through her hair, without emotion. Love is choice, he reflected silently. But trust is contract, and those who tear up the contract can't complain about the bill. He knew it still wasn't time to reveal anything. He needed to sew all the evidence together without leaving gaps. He would pretend to believe, because silence and patience are the weapons that most wound lies. The following week, Kaio received an alert from the logger. New files had been copied. Among them, a shared expense spreadsheet caught his attention. Upon opening it, his stomach churned. Each line was a calculated insult. There were listed expensive dinners, flower purchases, hotel reservations, and even a weekend trip, all paid with the additional card he himself had given Livia as a demonstration of trust. Betrayal was already painful, but using his money to finance the charade was a cruelty that surpassed limits. He didn't let himself be dominated by rage. He printed the entire spreadsheet, saved copies in 2 different clouds, and organized by chronological order. Now he had not only evidence of infidelity, but also of financial manipulation. "Every penny is a line of confession," he murmured, while flipping through the printed pages. He realized that the most powerful weapon against lies wasn't screaming, but objective detail, the coldness of numbers. There was no space for excuses or interpretations. You don't argue with dates, amounts, and receipts. You just accept the weight of the obvious. That night, Livia arrived with a gift in her hands, a tie wrapped in colored paper. "I thought it would suit you," she said, smiling as if she could erase fires with perfume. Kaio thanked her, kissed her forehead, and placed the package on the table. But inside, he reflected, those who try to put out fire with perfume only spread the smell of burning. He knew it wasn't time to explode, but to file. With each new proof, the tribunal he was preparing became more solid. It was no longer about doubt or distrust. It was about building a spectacle where lies themselves would fall under the lights of truth, with no space for escape. Kaio no longer had doubts. His dossier was complete. What were once just suspicions had become a wall of evidence. Photos, emails, receipts, GPS traces, financial spreadsheets. He knew he couldn't waste this arsenal in a momentary rage explosion. The question was no longer whether he would confront Livia, but how. And in that choice lay all the difference between revenge and justice. In silence, he reflected. Lies love small stages, where only 2 people watch. T. Ruth needs an audience, so there's no space for inversions. Sitting on the balcony, looking at the night, he remembered the name he had seen in the email, Raphael A. A careful search was enough to find more information. He discovered Christina, Raphael's wife, mother of 2 small children. He saw family photos on social media, happy captions that now sounded like cruel irony. Kaio's heart grew heavy. He knew that exposing the truth wouldn't just destroy his conjugal life, but also that of another family. For a moment, he thought about retreating, but soon he regained firmness. I wasn't the one who built this charade. I was just thrown into it. If I stay silent, lies continue governing. He decided then that the confrontation wouldn't be private, wouldn't happen in midnight screams. It would be a carefully prepared scene, with all actors present, so truth would reveal itself before witnesses. There would be no way to deny, nor to invert narratives. It would be the last act of a poorly written play, and he would have the privilege of pulling the curtain. T-Raiders like stages, he thought, breathing deeply. I'll give them a stage, but with the lights on. In the following days, Kaio maintained absolute silence, like someone keeping dynamite under the table without anyone noticing. For Livia, nothing had changed. She continued with the same excuses, the same delays, the same rehearsed smiles. What she didn't know was that every night Kaio reviewed his dossier like a lawyer prepares the case before the hearing. He printed copies, organized in chronological order, and kept versions in different clouds. Every detail was documented: hotel check-in times, dinner receipts, expense spreadsheets, emails exchanged with Raphael, and finally, the photos that spoke for themselves. The arsenal was ready. On Thursday during breakfast, Kaio made his boldest move. "Love, I was thinking of inviting some people for dinner on Sunday. It's been a while since we've received anyone," he said, with the naturalness of someone suggesting something banal. Livia, surprised, hesitated for a moment, but quickly returned to the role of dedicated wife. "It could be, but something simple, right?" Kaio's smile almost escaped, because among the guests would be Christina, Raphael's wife, who had already accepted his invitation. They had exchanged few messages, but enough for her to understand. Something serious needed to be exposed. That morning, while driving to work, Kaio reflected, "T-Raiders think they live in secret, but the secret dies when two families decide to turn on the same light." For the first time in weeks, he felt lighter, not because he took pleasure in destroying, but because he knew lies would no longer govern in silence. The stage was set, the date marked, the actors invited, and this time, there would be no improvisation. The curtain would fall on Sunday, and it wouldn't be him speaking loudest. It would be the evidence itself, screaming for itself. Sunday arrived with deceptive calm. The house was impeccable, new tablecloth on the table, aligned plates, polished glasses. Livia moved like the perfect hostess, checking every detail, as if the dinner were just another social gathering. She dressed elegantly, impeccable makeup, smile ready for display. Kaio watched her in silence, every gesture of hers increasing the contrast between the image of dedicated wife and the truth he carried in hidden folders and pen drives. In the kitchen, stirring the roast pot, he thought, "It's curious how those who lie believe they still control the plot. Little do they know the script has already been rewritten." At 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Livia opened the door expecting colleagues or neighbors, but her smile froze upon seeing who was there. Christina, Raphael's wife, stood before her. Her firm, almost defiant look carried the certainty of someone who also already suspected. Beside her, a friend accompanied as silent support. The room's air filled with electricity. "Good evening," said Kaio, coming from the kitchen with controlled and firm voice. "Welcome." Livia turned to him, eyes in contained fury, but it was too late. Christina's presence was the first crack opened in the wall of lies. The guests sat, and for a few minutes the table remained in uncomfortable silence. Wine was served, silverware clinked without purpose. Christina looked around, examining the house as if searching for hidden evidence in the walls. Livia tried to force a smile, but tension betrayed uneasiness. Kaio, serene, observed the two women, one trying to sustain the role of main actress, the other about to discover she had always been an extra in a cruel spectacle. "The orchestra is tuned," he thought, raising his glass. "Now just wait for the right moment for the music to begin." The meal began in tense silence, as if each one were waiting for the other to take the first step in a minefield. Livia tried to smile, fill glasses, start conversation about office banalities, but her voice trembled at the end of each sentence. Christina remained almost mute, just observing, her eyes now on Kaio, now on Livia, like someone who senses truth is seconds away from being revealed. Kaio, serene, maintained control. He chewed slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, but inside felt adrenaline pulsing. "It's now," he thought. "Time to pull the curtain." When the main courses were served, Kaio put his silverware on the table and stood up. "I believe we need clarity," he said in a calm but firm voice. He opened a black folder that was on the sideboard and removed the first set of documents, the hotel reservation in Livia's name, printed with dates and times. Next, the restaurant dinner receipt, paid for 2 people, with the loyalty registration in the name of S. Andrade. Finally, he placed on the table a sheet with GPS tracker prints showing routes that didn't lead to the office. With each proof, Livia's face lost color. "Kaio, what is this?" she exclaimed, trying to sound indignant. But her voice failed. Kaio didn't get excited. He just replied, "It's the truth, Livia. T. Ruth doesn't need makeup." Christina brought her hand to her mouth, tears contained in her eyes. "So this is it," she murmured, looking at the pages before her. It was as if each document were a stone thrown at the perfect facade Livia tried to maintain. Caio remained standing, looking fixedly at his wife. The tribunal was open, and the witnesses stood before the most implacable judge, the evidence itself. The impact of the evidence hung heavy over the table. Livia, initially paralyzed, soon tried to react. Her eyes sparkled, and her trembling voice sought to recover lost ground. "This is obsession, Caio. You're spying on me, invading my privacy. How dare you snoop through my computer, install things without my permission? Why, you've crossed all limits." The strategy was clear. Invert the narrative, transforming from accused to victim, from defendant to accuser. It was an old maneuver, but repeated with such desperation that it sounded rehearsed. Caio breathed deeply before responding. There was no anger in his voice, just an almost cutting serenity. "Privacy isn't a hiding place for betrayal, Livia. And obsession isn't seeking truth but insisting on lies. You're not being judged for what I discovered, but for what you did." His gaze didn't waver, and each word sounded like a sentence. The silence that followed seemed even more deafening than any scream. Christina, in tears, broke the silence. Now everything makes sense. Raphael's absences, the strange excuses, the odd schedules. You were the reason, weren't you? Livia looked away, unable to sustain the question. She tried to stammer a denial, but her voice wouldn't come out. The theater she had sustained for months was in ruins before the audience she least desired. Then Caio took the pen drive and connected it to the living room TV. The projected images were more devastating than any document. There was Livia laughing at the hotel door, holding hands with Raphael, exchanging a complicit kiss. There was no narrative that could resist the clarity of a photo. Well, you can scream, you can try to invert the story, but the images speak for themselves, Caio concluded. And at that moment, Livia's mask didn't just fall. It shattered before everyone's eyes. The silence that followed the image projection was suffocating. Livia, previously so eloquent, now seemed incapable of articulating a complete sentence. She tried to get up from the table, but her legs wobbled. "This doesn't prove anything. Doesn't mean what it seems," she babbled, clinging to the last rotten planks of the charade. But her voice had no conviction. It was like a weak echo in an empty room. Caio remained seated, gaze fixed on her, without raising his tone. "You called me dead weight in front of the family, said I had no ambition. WL, here's my ambition, showing who you really are, not with anger but with clarity." His words weren't screams. They were sharp knives, penetrating deep without noise. The contrast between his serenity and Livia's desperation was the true condemnation. Christina, until then contained in tears, slowly stood up. She held the printed photos in her hands, and her expression oscillated between pain and determination. "I'm going after my divorce. I won't allow Raphael to continue destroying my family. Thank you, Caio, for showing me what I needed to see." There was firmness in her voice, even though her heart still bled. It was the page turn of a woman who, just like Caio, had been deceived for months. Livia tried one last card. "You can't simply expose me like this, Caio. You're going to destroy everything. Our life, our house." But there was no longer space for pleas. Caio just replied, "I wasn't the one who destroyed. Why you did that when you decided to lie? I just pulled the curtain." The entire room seemed like a tribunal, and in that tribunal the sentence was already given. Livia's reputation was ruined, her mask in pieces, and there was no audience that could applaud her performance. The next morning, the house seemed different. The silence wasn't the same strategic silence as before, but a heavy, almost suffocating emptiness. Livia woke up early, avoided facing Caio, and left hurriedly, without having coffee. The improvised suitcases and hurried steps betrayed that she couldn't bear to remain there. The woman who once prided herself on commanding narratives now walked like someone who had lost the script. Caio, sitting at the table, had coffee calmly, almost ritualistically, feeling the weight of silent victory. It wasn't joy, but liberation. He knew the war didn't end at a dinner. The outcome was just beginning there. In the afternoon, Christina called. Her voice still carried tears, but there was firmness. "Caio, I've already scheduled with my lawyer. I won't let Raphael play with my family's life." There was a brief pause, and then she completed, "Thank you for not leaving me in the dark. I deserved to know." Caio replied with serenity. Lies destroy 2 homes at once. Now it's time to return the weight of choices to those who lied. He felt relieved not to be alone on the battlefield anymore. Meanwhile, the news was already spreading in close circles. Mutual friends commented on the dinner. Raphael's colleagues whispered at work, and looks began to change. What was once an appearance of perfection transformed into rumor, and rumor into shattered reputation. Caio didn't move a word, didn't spread anything. He just let the evidence speak. "There's no need to shout the truth," he thought. "It knows how to walk alone." That night, alone in the now silent house, Caio reflected on the journey. What began as pain had transformed into strategy, and strategy into justice. It wasn't about revenge, but liberation. That silence that now dominated the house was no longer oppressive. It was space to start over. The consequences didn't take long to arrive. Raphael, who until then circulated at work with the confidence of someone who believes himself untouchable, began to feel the ground crumble. The video with photos projected on TV, discreetly forwarded by Christina to some close colleagues, spread like wildfire. Clients found out, and a large contract he was leading was suspended. The company, worried about reputation, decided to temporarily remove him. For someone driven by vanity and the need for recognition, that removal was more painful than any legal punishment. It was proof that the social mask had also fallen. Meanwhile, Livia tried to confront Caio at home in a last attempt to invert the game. "Why you destroyed my life?" she screamed, eyes full of tears that no longer seemed sincere, but rather performance to extract some compassion. Caio, serene as always, replied, "No. Why you destroyed it when you chose to lie? I just pulled the curtain to show what already existed." She stared at him, but there was no longer ground to sustain the charade. Days later, she packed clothes in improvised suitcases and left the house. No goodbye, no plea for forgiveness, just the dry sound of the door slamming behind her. Friends and family, previously distracted spectators, now looked with distrust at Livia. Comments circulated at gatherings and on social media. What she so preserved, the image of perfect wife, was in ruins. And unlike Caio, who used silence as shield, she tried in vain to justify herself, but each word only confirmed the fall. Her reputation wasn't stolen by gossip, but imploded by her own choices. Caio, in turn, didn't need to celebrate out loud. It was enough to observe. Lies are arrogant because they believe they can deceive forever. But truth, when it arrives, doesn't ask permission. It enters and knocks down doors. And at that point, it was exactly what he was witnessing. Doors falling one by one, without him needing to lift a finger. Time passed, and while Livia disappeared into a small apartment in the suburbs, and Raphael dealt with his company suspension, Caio experienced an unexpected turn. The university rector where he worked called him for a meeting. The research project he had been developing in silence, often ignored by his own wife, had attracted external attention. The result was direct: leadership of a new team and a 40% salary increase. For the first time in months, he received recognition not just in words, but in numbers. It was the measurable gain from a journey of patience and resilience. In the official announcement, he heard colleagues commenting, "Finally, someone serious at the head of this project." Caio just smiled, remembering how many times he had been called dead weight by Livia. Now, the weight he carried was no longer humiliation, but responsibility and achievement. The irony was clear. While she tried to hide from shame, he climbed steps of credibility. Those who try to dim your light only manage to light their own fire, he reflected, with the serenity of someone who understands the value of each step taken in silence. At night, sitting on the balcony, Caio picked up the guitar that had been leaning against the wall for years. He strummed simple chords, but the melody sounded like freedom. There was no audience, no judgment, Just him and the night. The pain still existed, but no longer dominated him. It had transformed into fuel to start over. For the first time, he saw a future without the shadow of lies. Looking at the starry sky, he concluded, life always tests those who deserve to grow. Injustice isn't a stone in the path, but a disguised step. And in that thought he found peace. Not naive peace, but that of someone who faced chaos, documented truth, and emerged stronger. The tribunal had closed its doors, and Caio finally walked free to write a new story. Betrayal is like poison served in a crystal glass. It shines on the outside, but corrodes from within. Caio discovered this in the cruelest, but also most transformative way. What could have destroyed him became proof that truth doesn't need to run. It just needs to walk slowly, because sooner or later it catches up with lies. He didn't just survive the blow, but used each wound as fuel. He left the position of silent victim to become a patient strategist who kept receipts, built evidence, and waited for the right stage to pull back the curtain. In the end, the fall wasn't his, but of those who believed the charade could last forever. Livia lost her reputation, Raphael lost contracts and prestige, and Caio, he gained not just a concrete promotion, but also the certainty that dignity is patrimony that isn't negotiated. His measurable gain, the 40% increase, was just the financial translation of something greater, validation that patience and intelligence defeat the most well-rehearsed lie. And you, reader, have you ever found yourself deceived, underestimated, cast as supporting actor in your own story? Have you noticed how small lies hide big secrets? Maybe today you're in Caio's role, surrounded by suspicions and silence. The question is, will you explode on impulse, or will you choose the battlefield? Will you be content to suffer, or will you prepare the stage for truth? Life tests us all. Some choose to flee, others choose to fight, but only those who learn to transform pain into proof, injustice into stepping stones, and silence into strategy truly grow. What would you do in Caio's place? If they've already stolen your work, comment, I am no T invisible, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Oh, and if you really enjoyed the story and want to support this work, help me with a coffee on Ko-Fi. Your contribution, however small, makes all the difference for new stories like this to continue being told.